All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going on a highly relatable and honestly, probably a little painful journey through the universal experience of a doomed corporate project. Let's call it Project Phoenix. We're going to unpack the exact, incredibly colorful, and often self-deprecating terms that business people use to describe the uncomfortable roles they play just to survive. Get ready, because this is the lexicon of corporate adversary. I want you to take a second and think back to your own office traumas. Ever felt like you were left completely holding the bag? Or maybe you were forced to clean up a colossal mess that you absolutely didn't create? Well, today we're translating all this corporate survival language into a series of short, totally recognizable office stories. We're going to track our doomed initiative from its optimistic first day all the way to its bitter, chaotic end, and we'll be meeting some very familiar characters along the way. So, let's kick things off with Section 1, Meet the Cast of Characters, Assembling the Team. Okay, it's day one of Project Phoenix. The coffee is fresh, the kickoff presentation is beautifully queued up, and you look around the conference table, coming to the sudden, horrifying realization of exactly who you're going to be working with for the next 6 months. First up, meet our hero, the designated driver. Now, they aren't literally holding the car keys. They're the one who has to stay metaphorically sober and responsible. While everyone else on the team is dodging actual work and getting completely drunk on unrealistic expectations, this exhausted but reliable person, let's just call him Bob from accounting, is quietly keeping the whole project on track. And sitting right next to Bob is his trusted partner in responsibility, the adult in the room. This is the poor person forced to ground the team's wild, blue sky ideas with a massive dose of harsh reality. When the marketing team enthusiastically suggests a $1 million launch party on a $10 budget, the adult in the room is the one who has to sigh heavily, impose discipline, and drag everyone back down to planet Earth. It is an exhausting role because they're constantly taking on the emotional labor of saying no, just so the project doesn't immediately crash and burn. But come on, no team is complete without the lone wolf. This is the person who operates entirely outside team norms. They just ignore all the agreed-upon deadlines because they insist on coding in a totally different language or using their own deeply obscure software. They are a brilliant, chaotic contrast to our responsible workers, and they instantly set the stage for future conflict, causing a massive amount of friction for Project Phoenix. Moving on to Section 2, the meeting from hell, when the actual work begins. All right, so the honeymoon phase officially over. The atmosphere in the conference room has suddenly gotten incredibly tense. Everyone is staring intensely at their coffee cups. Why? Well, because of the elephant in the room. There is a massive, completely fatal flaw in Project Phoenix's timeline. Maybe your core vendor just went bankrupt, or the foundational code flat out doesn't work. Whatever it is, it's the uncomfortable truth that absolutely everyone is avoiding mentioning out loud. And just as someone finally works up the courage to bypass the elephant and end this agonizing meeting, the devil's advocate chimes in. Technically, this is the person tasked with arguing the opposing view just to make sure all angles are covered. But in our story, they usually pipe up at exactly 4:55 p.m., dragging the agony out for another full hour purely for the intellectual thrill of disagreeing. While a devil's advocate is incredibly useful in the planning phase, they become deeply toxic during execution. And then, for the grand finale of this terrible meeting, someone drops the grenade. This isn't just a minor issue. We're talking about a massive, unresolved problem that a coworker literally throws into the middle of the table to cause chaos, right before they stand up, say, "Anyway, I'm out for a long weekend, good luck with that," and just walk away. This takes us right into Section 3, when things go wrong, total project chaos. Project Phoenix is now officially off the rails. Panic is setting in, and we are shifting rapidly from the planning phase into full-blown crisis mode. Welcome to the life cycle of a disaster. First, that grenade problem arises and instantly becomes the hot potato. It gets passed rapidly from marketing to sales to IT because literally no one wants to deal with it. Eventually, the music stops, and it morphs into the dirty job. This is that deeply necessary but incredibly unpleasant task that no one wants to own, but someone inevitably has to roll up their sleeves and clean up. Now, sometimes the dirty job is so complex, or the internal politics are just so incredibly toxic, that nobody inside the building will touch it with a 10-foot pole. That is when leadership brings in the hired gun. Think of that expensive, sharply dressed outside consultant flown in on a Tuesday to completely restructure the database, simply because the insiders won't or can't do it themselves without starting an all-out departmental war. As Project Phoenix spirals completely out of control, you, the everyday team member, are going to be backed into some pretty uncomfortable corners. You might find yourself biting the bullet, forcing yourself to do something painful but necessary, like working the entire holiday weekend. Or maybe you're taking one for the team, accepting personal embarrassment to protect your peers. And if you are really unlucky, you end up carrying the can. That means you are the poor soul left taking the absolute responsibility for something that went horribly, horribly wrong. Eventually, somebody has to rip the Band-Aid off. Enter the bad guy. This is usually an unfortunate middle manager who finally has to step up, look the exhausted team in the eye, and enforce an unpopular decision, like entirely canceling Project Phoenix. They have to deliver the unwelcome news that all those late nights and long hours were basically for nothing. But it's worth remembering that this middle manager is often just a messenger, taking the emotional heat for upper management's failures. Which brings us to the dark final chapter, Section 4, the inevitable fallout. Accountability time. The post-mortem phase has arrived. The project is officially a massive loss, and upper management, well, they want heads to roll. This is when you hear the terrifying footsteps of the hatchet man. Unlike the hired gun who fixes things, the hatchet man is a ruthless executive sent by corporate specifically to clean house. Their one and only purpose is to make cuts, restructure the department, or just outright fire people after the disaster. While the hatchet man circles, the surviving managers start using desperate defensive tactics to save their own divisions. This is what happens when corporate silos compete instead of collaborate. A manager might deploy a poison pill. They'll sabotage their own code or attach a wildly unattractive clause to their work just so their department can't easily be absorbed by a rival team. It's every department for themselves. Now that the dust is settling, blame has to be assigned. And there is a subtle but absolutely crucial difference in corporate survival here. The fall guy is the person who structurally just takes the blame when things go wrong. It's practically baked into their job description. The scapegoat, however, is an innocent bystander. They are someone unfairly blamed and targeted by others who are desperately trying to hide their own mistakes. Often, that poor scapegoat turns into the sacrificial lamb. This is a truly tragic fate. Picture the junior intern who barely even touched the project, right? But they are practically offered up on a silver platter to appease furious clients or angry executives. They absorb the criticism purely so the senior leaders can survive the purge. And how exactly do you get chosen as a sacrificial lamb? Simple. Through the ultimate act of corporate betrayal, throwing someone under the bus. This is violently shifting blame onto someone else purely to protect yourself. It's that shocking moment when formerly friendly coworkers turn on each other in the conference room just to survive the final round of cuts. Let me tell you, it's a massive indicator of a total lack of psychological safety within the team. But hey, our story doesn't have to end in total betrayal. We can conclude our project narrative with a rare but genuinely noble act: falling on your sword. This is when a true leader steps up. Instead of throwing their team under the bus, they voluntarily resign or accept the full blame for the project's failure to protect their group. It is the ultimate professional sacrifice, and ironically, it's often the one act that earns a leader lifelong loyalty from their industry peers. So as we wrap up the saga of our doomed project, I want to leave you with one big, provocative question to think about. Look closely at your own office dynamics, your own team meetings, and the projects you're working on right now. Think about all the colorful roles we just unpacked. Which role are you playing today? Are you the exhausted designated driver holding it together, or are you the lone wolf causing chaos? Understanding this language doesn't just help you survive the corporate world, it helps you master it. Keep that in mind the next time you step into the meeting from hell.